I'm Jordan.
And I'm Rosanna.
And on this podcast, we explore how to take life off autopilot
and relentlessly pursue a life worth living together. Welcome to Season 4, Episode 10 of the Relentless Pursuit podcast, If We Were to Rewrite Our Wedding Vows. So in the last episode, we were talking about our trip to Mexico. And one of the things that we didn't mention was that my very handsome and romantic husband had planned for the trip. I packed our suitcases and our swimsuits and all of that. But he had come up with a question of the day, a challenge of the day, and an optional intimate challenge of the day. And so what was great is I would pick from...
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to make it... I know we enjoy doing that, but like if we had such a short amount of time on the show, I wanted to like just be intentional with it. Like this is really a chance to talk and interact, and I want to have fun and meaningful conversations and memories. So that kind of inspired it. So...
And, you know, he's done similar things before, like on a road trip. He had like questions that we would talk about like while we were driving. And so, of course, like I should have known that he would do something like this, but it totally was not on my radar. And so he, you know, puts these things out on the table. And so every morning I choose one from each category and like you kind of read it and it's, you know, you got your goals for the day. And what's great about the questions is we would pull it before breakfast. And then if we hadn't already talked about it or started talking about it during the day, then we would save it kind of for dinner. And let that kind of guide our conversation since we had so much uninterrupted time. And so one of the questions we pulled, do you remember exactly how it was phrased?
It was pretty straightforward. So one of the questions was if we were to rewrite our wedding vows. Now, this is celebrating our 15th anniversary. So basically, I think tests what have we learned about marriage since the time that we got married. Because we had very traditional vows. We had the traditional vows. I don't want to say they were traditional to us anyway. So we had a very Italian wedding, but a Protestant ceremony.
Yeah, I was going to say, you said like a very Italian wedding, except we did not get married in the Catholic Church.
All right. So anyway, so let me read these vows because this is what you and I said to one another when we got married all those ages ago. It says, I, Jordan, take you, Rosanna, to be my wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until we are parted by death, is at least how this template goes. This is my solemn vow. So we said something pretty close
pretty
to
similar.
that.
Yeah, there's a slight variation, but yeah.
But since then, you know, we've seen a lot of people write their own vows. And I think the idea even came up for us too. And we're like, well, I like the traditional ones. Let's just stick with that. So yeah, I think that question that we started talking about during our trip was really just like, what have we learned anything about marriage that would change what our vows would look like to one another?
Well, and when you asked me that question, it just got me, you know, thinking about marriage in general. And obviously I'm a day of wedding coordinator. And so I see a lot of ceremonies happen and I see a lot of people exchange vows. And even more so now, I've seen people, even if they recite traditional vows, whether it's in a church or at a venue, that it's easier just to say like, I'm going to, you know, repeat after me. And you say those vows in front of people because they're nervous. More and more I see couples do a first look. So they meet each other away from everybody else on the day of the wedding so that they can actually have like this intimate moment of seeing your bride for the first time without, you know, a couple hundred people staring at you and walking and all of that. And most times when couples do that, so they get this like very intimate time together on their wedding day to see each other for the first time, more and more of them are reciting their own personal vows.
Mm-hmm. Which I think is really interesting to have like personal vows that you're really just sharing between the two of you. So I want to get your take on this, maybe not this moment, but like I think there's something to the public nature of vows as well. So are they then doing more traditional vows during the ceremony?
They are doing traditional vows during the ceremony because, and if you think about weddings from like a logistics standpoint, like a ceremony needs to be so many minutes because you have to fit in, you know, your reception and photos and all of that. So it's just easier to recite like those traditional vows in front of people. Also, a lot of times like bride and grooms aren't necessarily like these like upfront type of people. And so to have to say these very touching things, you've got a bug on your forehead.
Yeah, for those of you just listening to the show instead of watching, I have a fly literally
swarming.
Yeah, flying in front. So in case I hit the mic or you just can hear me flapping and try to swat this fly away. I feel like Mike Pence during the vice presidential debate.
It's exactly like that right now. So, they're just nervous. But I've also seen bride and grooms give very personal vows where it's very tearful and it's very heartfelt and they're choking up and everybody, there's not a dry eye because like they feel the emotion and just like the intentionality and like how beautifully the words are crafted, to represent something so beautiful.
They smear their makeup.
All of it. So, but I always thought I was like a traditional, like, obviously I got married at 23. We were both very young.
Me too.
Obviously never been married before. And so I think at that time it was easier just to be like, yes, I can recite these vows. I mean them. But,
and I thought I'm like, I don't know what else to add to it. Too.
Yeah, what would I add
says
to
it
that?
all.
But, vows will never include everything. We're 15 years in, and we've got a lot of context for like what marriage is, what it should be, what it could be, what it isn't, and perspective and experience. And that makes all the difference. So, when you ask me that question, I'm like, well, if we like renewed our vows at 20 or 25 years, I would want to write them. I wouldn't just want to recite the traditional vows because to me, there's a lot that I've learned about marriage and about what makes a marriage work and about like what I should expect from you and what you can expect from me that I think is important. And then, kind of renewing those vows moving forward, it's these promises that are fuller and give a wider array of what I vow to you as we move forward.
So let's just talk about what are vows, because I think we can use the term usually within a wedding context, but it doesn't have to be only in a wedding. So how would you just define what a vow is?
I would say vows are promises or serious commitments.
Yeah.
But how often do we promise or commit to something or to do something and then jump ship?
Yeah.
So it's obviously a vow should have more meaning than just a promise or a commitment.
That's the way I would characterize it too. Like for me, like a promise, you can promise something small. Like you could promise the kids, like I promise I'll get you a sucker at the store when we go, right? And that's like I wouldn't vow that. A vow seems like it's a promise about something serious, is the way that I would define it. And so. And of course, like that's appropriate. Like when you're getting married, like that's a pretty serious commitment that you're about to make. So I think the word vow is obviously appropriate to it. So I was just looking at the traditional vows, at least the ones that we said, and it really only says one thing. You're only vowing one thing, and it's the only thing I think you have to vow at a wedding, which is you're basically saying, "I'm going to stay with you no matter what." Like if you reread what I said, or what I had read, like to having to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, whatever, until death do we part. It's basically saying like we're gonna be married until one of us dies.
Which, and I'm not the antagonist, and it's not like that I don't believe in marriage because, I love you and I would be married to you forever. But, that was a lot easier to hold that vow when people, died at like 40. Like, I'll be married to you for like 20 years, right? But now you're vowing people are getting married later, but, to be married to someone for 60, 70, 80 years.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, if we live to be 120, it's like, well, wait, I didn't sign up for 100 years.
You're 100 years old, you're getting remarried because you've grown out of each other.
Yeah. So that's beside the point. But that's basically what the vow is that till death do we part. So what I noticed is missing that I'm guessing a lot of people have put into their own vows is how that time together is going to look, right? Because the only thing we really vow is that we're gonna be together. We're gonna be together forever. You're stuck with me. So I'm trying to think what else to, like, if I were to write my own vows, like what else would I add? I think I couldn't improve upon the way this is phrased, like we're going to be together forever, but here's how I'm going to treat you, or here's how you can expect to be interacted with during that time.
Yeah. Well, and I think that also begs the question, right? If you're listening to this and you're not yet married and you're thinking about writing your own vows, or you've been married for a while and you think about the vows that you recited and maybe what you want your marriage to look like going forward, like you really need to consider what marriage is and what marriage is not. And one wedding that I did a couple years ago, it was for two students of mine that I had when I taught, hired me to be their day of coordinator. And they referenced the poem, "The Missing Piece Meets the Big O" by Shel Silverstein. And so take a moment, you should read it, but it's like this little piece, kind of like this like wedge shape that is trying to insert itself into all of these other shapes to find their missing piece. He wants to find the missing piece of him. He wants to be like the shape's missing piece. And so I think one thing we need to realize within the marriage relationship is that true love doesn't complete us. Like, we're already complete as we are. True love helps us become ourselves fully. And so I think you have to keep that in mind. Me marrying you, you marrying me, or someone marrying someone else, it's not ultimately going to solve all your problems. It's not going to fulfill every need that you have. And so that if you don't already know who you are and what you want, if you don't already love yourself for who you are, this other person is not going to fulfill those needs for you. So it's
you could still be on the journey of finding out who you are, right? You can still be learning how to love yourself and get married, but the act of marriage doesn't resolve that.
No, it does not solve all your problems. It does not. There's not a missing piece. Like, you are who you are already, and so should be the merging of two circles.
That's what I was just going to say. So is this like a Venn diagram?
It's a Venn diagram kind of thing, right? Like, that you're complete as you are. You're not a pie piece with like a missing quarter, or a missing 16th, or, a missing half. You're complete who you are, faults and all, right? But it's the merging of two complete people who, when are merged together, you fully realize who you are, and you actually become better because of that person in your life. Not because you're married to them, or not because they're going to help you solve your problems.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a huge component of the relentless pursuit, is the idea that you are kind of leveraging this significant other in your life to become more of who you are, and they're leveraging you to become more of who they are. All right. So Jerry Maguire was wrong.
You complete me.
You do not complete me.
Show me the money.
Okay. I will. I really need to improve upon my references. I mentioned that in the last episode, but I'm going to go here anyway. So I thought of the classic film Runaway Bride.
Which I love Julia Roberts.
It's not
and
a great
Richard
movie.
Gere.
It's not a great movie. And actually, this is the second time I'm referencing it on the
referenced
show.
About the eggs.
So maybe there's more to it. But there is some commentary on romance and relationships in this. And Richard Gere's character is like, he's talking about these different proposals that people have given the Julia Roberts character. He's like, those are all garbage. Everything you see in Hollywood is garbage. If I want to propose, I'm going to propose with a real proposal, like with truth. That's basically what he's saying. So let me just read for you what he uses to propose. He says, I guarantee that we'll have tough times. And I guarantee that at some point, one or both of us will want to get out. But I also guarantee that if I don't ask you to be mine, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Because I know in my heart, you're the only one for me. It's different. And you could say that's not romantic, or maybe it is romantic. He's trying to be authentic and recognizing, like, marriage is hard. So these are not vows. This is his proposal to her. But it recognizes that, when you get married, like, it doesn't solve anything. If anything, it creates like a whole host of additional new, like, problems and challenges, right? Lord knows it. But at the same time, like, there is this idea of acknowledging those elements, and using that knowledge to then, cooperatively craft the kind of relationship that you want.
Yeah, but I don't. Getting married at 23, I didn't think that was real. Like, oh, it's going to be hard, right? Like, can you imagine? Do you remember how excited we were to get married?
We're just happy to finally be together.
Right. We had been dating together for 8 years. We were like together for 6 years. We were engaged for 2 years.
Yeah, so but a lot of that time we were in separate colleges.
Right.
We didn't live together.
We were angsty. Like, we wanted to be together. Like, it was just like, we were so excited, but I really feel like we really walked in blind to, like, what marriage is. Like, we had some premarital counseling, and we even had these, like, delusions of grandeur of, like, what being married would look like almost as if it was being on the beach in Mexico, for the rest of our lives. Like, that, that we were both going to have careers, and we were both going to be working.
The honeymoon phase, right?
Yeah.
Because everything is perfect during the honeymoon, and then you go to set up your real life.
We were married like 5-7 years, and people are always like, you look so happy. Like, oh, don't worry, the honeymoon phase won't last forever. And even though we've had our fair share
I'm
of,
still
like,
on the honeymoon phase.
Well,
people,
but that's like, we've always loved each other, but it's just in new ways. And even with difficulties or setbacks or struggles or challenges, like, for us, like, plans have changed, but our hearts haven't. And that's what I'm excited about when I think about, like, trying to rewrite Vows. And even today I was like, gosh, if if he was going to ask me on the episode to recite like some vows, like what would they look like? And so I was kind of like doodling on my paper, like, well, what would they look like?
Yeah. I was starting to write some things, but I figured
Yeah,
when we
last time you
celebrate,
made me cry.
I don't have anything for that today, but for our 25th anniversary, we will what do you call it? Like reinstate your vows.
You renew your vows.
You renew your vows.
Reinstate them like your driver's license at the DMV.
Right. So I have 10 years to work on it.
I don't know. I've got like some thoughts.
Okay, sure. Well, lay them on me.
Right?
I have thoughts. There are bullet points
But like
on
this,
my notes here. But
this is literally like what I wrote at the kitchen counter while one of our children was eating pretzels in my ear earlier today. So it's not like a finished version, but
Sure.
just maybe to make you smile a little bit. And it starts with that notion that plans change, but my heart will not. While I may be the most indecisive human to choose what's for takeout on Fridays or what to order in a restaurant, given the choice of who to spend my life with, I'd choose you without hesitation. I promise to listen, to understand, and to be slow to speak. To share your dreams and spur them on. To build a home, a life, and a family together. One with learning, laughter, and lightheartedness. I promise to be your partner, your friend, and your lover. To work with you to be better together. I accept you as you are, and I will always care for you. So those were just, some
That's
thoughts
sweet.
I had.
Yeah.
I know you're not tearing up, but I'm tearing up reading it. Because I think, thinking about our relationship and the role that you play and the role that I play, and even some of like my weaknesses, like,
what weaknesses, dear?
well,
I'm just
not listening to
kidding.
understand always and not being slow to speak, but like things that, right, when you write those down as promises, you catch yourself a little bit more. And so even because of our time away and our trip and the question that you had asked over dinner one night and thinking about it, like I really do want to, like, this little bit that I wrote down kind of just hang up somewhere as a reminder to me of like the ways in which I can love you better from year 15 to year 25. Mm-hmm. That's not just for better, for worse, and sickness. And, yeah, those are good. But what's more specific to love you in a meaningful, everyday kind of way?
Yeah. Now that we've gotten to know each other over the last 15 years.
Yeah. We're just getting started.
And you understand marriage a little bit more, too. All right. Like I said, I had just bullet points of elements really to answer this question. Like, what should vows contain? What would we put in our own vows? So, of course, like I still think it has to, like, it's not a wedding vow unless it gives a nod to I'm going to be with you until we die. That I think that's just what marriage is. So you have to say that at some point. But then, like, everything else that goes into it, like I wrote down there's different types of love that a relationship contains. So especially when you first get married, like it's when you're young, especially, like there's kind of this giddiness to it, and I wouldn't call it infatuation, but I think that's a little bit more of an ingredient. But now that we have an established marriage, there's kind of this like committal, this I'm your person kind of love, which is, I would say, a little bit of a different strain. I would talk about what the relationship should look like. So, and I think that's what a lot of you hit the nail on the head with, a lot of those things of kind of the ideal person you want to be for me in the relationship.
Right, which is attributed to what you need to feel loved and to feel like you want to be a part of the marriage, mm-hmm. in good times and in bad.
Yeah. And I also think the biggest thing that is overlooked when you first get married is the recognition that you're going to change as individuals over time.
Yeah, and as a couple.
So we've said this countless times, but who we are today is not who we were when we got married. So the idea is like growing together, like change it's inevitable. So, but that we're growing together, we're knowledgeable of one another's changes, of who I am and who you are, and then who we are in that, not expecting you to stay exactly the same. I think this is the old joke with marriage, like the bride marries the groom thinking that she can change him, and the groom marries the bride hoping that she stays the same forever. And neither comes true. But just acknowledging that no matter, like, I think part of my vows would acknowledge, like, no matter who you become, no matter who you like slowly morph into, even if you're not identical to the person I'm marrying today, like, I will still stand by you. I'm your person.
Okay. Right. It talks about partnership and teamwork. Right. Being there, not just, in the bedroom. You don't even know what to say. I said in the bedroom. You can't even think
just got
straight now.
excited. Yeah,
You got
let's go
so
ahead.
excited right now.
Okay, so I have a few questions. I'm going to start with one question I didn't actually write down, and it's just a random thought. It's a silly thought. What if two people like wrote one another's vows? Like I wrote the vows that I want you to say to me, right? And you wrote down what you want me to vow to you. I did. I think that's just like
Sounds like something that would be on like Ellen's Game of Games or something weird.
okay. I did make you, I'm sure I made multiple promises before we got married, but I do remember one that I've tried to stick to the most, and that is that you never have to be uncomfortable in your own house. And by that, I meant
Yes.
the thermostat. Rosanna controls the thermostat, people. So you want a little cooler, we turn it down. You want the fan on, the fan goes on, without question. So I've tried to adhere to that.
Oh yeah, after being in other people's houses and being uncomfortable, like being somewhere and it like being so hot that like neither of us can breathe. He's like, I vow. I think you literally said like that. I vow to you that in your own house you will never be uncomfortable. Swoon.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
the most beautiful thing I could ever hear.
Okay. All right, so I have some actual questions here. This one is the most practical. So, all right, so you say a vow at some point, and I believe people mean it when they say it, like during the ceremony, right? So, how do we make these stick? Like, especially when we're in a difficult time, where, as Richard Gere might argue from Runaway Bride, like I want out, or you want out, or we both want out. Like, we have to like think back to I made this vow, right? I made a big promise that no matter what happens, I'm going to stay by you. So, and whatever else we may include within our vows, like how do we remind ourselves of the significance of what we promised our relationship would look like to the other?
I think it's a reminder that nobody is ever perfect. And for as much as that other person is upsetting you right now, whether on accident or on purpose, that we often make the other person feel the exact same way. And so it's like that notion of like extending grace or knowing that I might not like you right now for the way you're acting or behaving, but ultimately I love you. And so I might be a little miffed right now. I might ignore you right now. I might yell at you right now. Ultimately, I love you. And I want to make amends. I want to repair what is broken or is undone. And so you have to want to make it okay. And I think that's part of it.
Yeah. I think that's a big part for me too. Is like no matter what's come up, like still remembering, still trusting that love is at the core. Like I've never had to question your love because I know that no matter what the goof up is, like that love is still, that's foundational. So if there is a problem, it can be fixed because we trust that the love we rely on from the other person is still present.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's deeply rooted in trust. Like, right, you haven't given me a reason to not trust you, right? Or you haven't given me a reason to question the love that we have for one another. And so if you remember that, it's like, okay, like I trust him, I love him, he trusts me, he loves me. So yeah, I mean, we're going to butt heads or we're going to argue or we're not going to agree, but that does not necessarily diminish the underlying trust and love that's established. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you were then to break that trust or that love in some way, right, then obviously then that becomes a barrier.
Rattles the foundation.
Right. Yeah. And so where is the foundation? How deep is it set, right? How firm of a foundation is it? How long have you been able to sustain that, right? And I know this is silly, but there are certain things that you want to do that make me uncomfortable. And there have been times where I've just had to say, like, even though I've like told you, I don't think it's a good idea. I don't want to do it. You know, you've reminded me, do you trust me? Have I led you astray in this way ever? You know, best case scenario is this, worst case scenario is that. Like, do you trust that even with the worst case scenario that we would be okay? And I have to say yes.
Well, that's even more, that's beyond love. Like even if things went wrong, like we would still love each other, right?
Correct. But like,
and you're
that's what
talking
you've
about
said.
like a financial
yeah, a financial
investment,
decision
not-
or an investment or like, you know, oh, okay, I want to, you know, go skydiving. Like, right. Like it's just things like that where it's like, all right, I'm just going to trust and move forward in that.
What questions you got?
I don't even think I have any questions.
All right, I have another question for you. I referenced this earlier, should vows be public, or I would say should, but does it make a difference if it's public versus private?
Does it matter if I tell you I love you, just the two of us, or if I say it in front of my family? Like, does that matter to you? Do you know that you're loved? Yes or no?
Well, I think the promise is still the promise, no matter the context. But I do feel like part of the ceremony, like, why do we invite people to our ceremony? Which is really like, a ceremony is a process,
Public display.
through which like those vows are made. But we invite people to that in many cases because I think we want people to share in that moment. It's worthy of celebration, right? And just like all significant moments, we like to share those. But I also think that there's something to be said about, like, I'm not just going to say this to you, on the sly, but this is such an important promise that I'm going to declare it in front of all these people who are now also aware of this promise.
To help hold you accountable.
That accountability and support that goes in with that. So I think that's, I don't think vows have to be public, but I think that just looking traditionally at why they often are is because when we do something as formal as that, it often involves the people we care about, within our friends and family, to help recognize and support that.
And now that when I think about once I hear all of these weddings, during wedding season, there's often a reminder to the people in the audience that are witnessing it and participating that they are a part of this vow, right? That like they're supposed to come alongside the couple and be a part of their marriage journey. And I think maybe that's something that has gotten lost over time, where it's like we attend with the intention of like congratulating and then having a great party afterwards. But like, how many times do people in that circle of friends and family that come, how often are they supporting you in your marriage?
Yeah. What does it even look like? Like even
coming alongside of you, and whether it's mentoring or challenging or asking you questions like,
hey, how you doing on your vows, buddy?
Well, right. Is that's not normal? It's not a normal thing. Yeah. So like, how do we normalize like talking about marriage with other people who are married, or like even just inviting a younger couple over once they are married, just to talk about like what they're going through in their marriage and be like, oh, yep, that's totally normal. Like this, and just talking through those things with them. So it's interesting that like, yeah, there are all these people there that are a part of it, but how often do you let those people into your marriage in an honest and productive way? Yeah.
All right, so a lot of good thoughts about I really appreciate what you wrote, and I would like to see that displayed. And I guess I'll have to work on my own parallel version as well. I got 10 years, so.
You got 10 years. Well, you did that beautiful thing during Love Month, and so I'll let that...
Season 3, Episode 1, everyone.
Let that wash over me a little bit.
Yeah.
So what about a takeaway? I've got something that I wrote that I think is just a good reminder for all of us, whether we're not married, ready to get married, or have been married for a while, that I can share to kind of close us out.
Does it start with Dearly Beloved?
No, what's that Prince song? Dearly Beloved. I should know this, but I was born in the 80s and... don't know it. Okay, so kind of the takeaway would be this. Vows serve as a reminder that you are committing to spend the rest of your lives together. A grand journey into a beautiful, awe-inspiring, yet unknown, uncharted, and sometimes scary territory. I think sometimes we make these vows without really knowing what we're getting into. Kind of like parenting. So maybe it's important to stop, to think, to remind ourselves of what we are doing in and through our marriages on a daily basis.
Beautifully said.
Thanks.
All right. Well, we appreciate you guys spending another episode with us. And if you haven't made your way over to iTunes yet to leave a 5-star rating and a review, please do that now. Also, go to the relentlesspursuitpodcast.com, where you can find more information and blog posts, as well as an opportunity to subscribe to our email list. So we appreciate all of you listening this week, and we're looking forward to talking to you again next week.
Have a good day. Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to today's show. We hope you will use this conversation as a starting point for your own. We hope you're encouraged to think and act more intentionally.
If you want to learn more, you can visit our website, therelentlesspursuitpodcast.com, where you can find notes on today's show, plus additional blog posts, and you can subscribe to our free members list.
Please subscribe, leave a review, and share with your friends.
Facebook and Instagram are two great places to connect with us for daily doses of our quotable quotes, behind the scenes, and real-time photos, videos, and challenges.
Until next time, let us know how you are taking life off autopilot
And relentlessly pursuing what matters.